Look at NHS waiting lists. You can't look at access to GP services without understanding that the population explosion has put intolerable pressures on.
Amira has delivered over 300 babies for the NHS. This week, she read a manifesto that questions whether people like her are part of the problem.
The population explosion is diminishing the quality of life of everybody in this country.
A party that barely existed 2 years ago is now polling ahead of the Conservatives. Their message is simple. Britain is broken, and they know who broke it.
We just can't take million upon million upon million. It does not work.
But this isn't just a story about reform. It's a story about the Britain that made them possible.
The number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Farage Nigel Paul, Reform UK, 21,275.
July 2024. Reform UK wins 5 parliamentary seats. Not enough to govern, but enough to terrify Westminster. Michael voted Labour for 30 years. His father was a miner. His grandfather built the railways. In 2024, he voted Reform. The numbers tell the story. In constituencies Labour held for generations, Reform arrived, then conquered. Grimsby, Hartlepool, Redcar, towns that built Britain, now voting to tear down the system they feel abandoned them. The establishment called it populism. The voters called it overdue. But why now and why them? For decades, Britain promised its working class a simple deal. Work hard, pay taxes, follow rules. The system will look after you. Danny left school at 16 for an engineering apprenticeship. The company went bust in 2023. His apprenticeship became a 0-hour contract. His future became uncertainty. Now he delivers takeaways he can't afford to eat. His 0-hour contract pays less than the rent of a single room. He cycles past homes worth more than he'll ever earn. The job centre tells him to retrain. The housing site tells him to earn more. The delivery app tells him to work faster. At 21, Danny still lives at home with his parents. A starter home costs 11 times his annual salary. Marriage feels impossible. Children are unaffordable. Meanwhile, net migration hits record highs. Politicians celebrate diversity, and Danny's job prospects disappear. But Reform has the answer.
Migration happening on the level that it was. And what do we get? We got the greatest betrayal of a massive democratic majority that we've ever seen in our lifetimes.
You see, the Britain Danny inherited feels foreign. Not because change is wrong, but because no one asked him if he was ready for it. But Reform promised to ask. Reform's policies sound simple because they're designed to. No more boat crossings, flat tax at 20%, leave the European Court of Human Rights, the same rate whether you stack shelves or own the store. Economists warn the flat tax will disproportionately benefit high earners, and legal experts say leaving the ECHR could isolate Britain diplomatically. But in my opinion, Reform voters aren't voting for economic models. They're voting against what they feel is betrayal. Sarah's primary school has lost 2 teachers this year. The council blamed budget cuts, but at the same time, foreign aid spend has risen. Her class sizes have doubled, the resources have vanished, and children she taught for years struggle with English because it's not spoken at home. She doesn't blame the children, she blames the system that expects miracles without adequate resources. When Reform promises English-first education, she hears recognition. Recognition that integration requires investment, that change requires planning, and that communities need preparation, not just platitudes. To reformers, for the first time in years, someone is promising to slow down, to put Britain first, even if the promises might be impossible to keep. Brexit was supposed to change everything, take back control, end freedom of movement, and supposedly make Britain great again. Instead, immigration tripled, the promises became excuses, the control became chaos. Michael voted Brexit in 2016. He voted Conservative in 2019 to get Brexit done. But by 2024, he felt betrayed by both. Now, it's Reform. Not because he trusts them, but because everyone else broke their word.
We've already spent money erecting the border fence around the port at Calais. We're putting in place the border fence at Coquelles outside the tunnel.
Once we've left the EU, we will be fully in control of who comes here.
But I am clear that our immigration system must change.
If we can't stop the boats, our ability to help genuine refugees in future will be constrained.
That will finally take back control of our borders and close the book on a squalid chapter for our politics, our economy, and our country.
5 Conservative prime ministers promised to target immigration. All failed. The targets became suggestions. The suggestions became lies. Starmer promised stability, but for reformers, stability looks like stagnation. While politicians debated, the boats kept coming. While lawyers argued, communities kept changing. The NHS, supposedly protected by stopping freedom of movement, collapsed under pressure. Not because of immigration, but because of underfunding. The irony is, the health service depends on the immigration politicians promised to stop. The reform solution is simpler. Train British workers first. Stop importing problems. They don't mention that training a doctor takes over 7 years and costs over £100,000, or that British graduates often leave for higher paying countries. But complexity doesn't win elections. Simplicity does. Reform promises to fix immigration in 100 days. Economists say mass deportations would crash essential services. The NHS relies on foreign workers. Construction depends on immigrant labour. Social care would collapse without overseas staff. Some nights, Amira wonders if the country she serves would still welcome her if she arrived today. She trains British nurses and half quit within 2 years due to low pay and impossible pressure. There's better opportunities abroad. Reforms promised to train British workers ignores why British workers leave. Their flat tax would cut government revenue by $40 billion. The money has to come from somewhere. Schools like Sarah's would face deeper cuts. Hospitals like Amira's would lose more staff. Communities like Michael's would decay further. And leaving the ECHR could jeopardize trade relationships with Europe. What begun as taking back control could end with Britain alone in the world. The economy reform promises to fix might shrink instead, but pointing out contradictions doesn't address the pain that created reform. The system failed these people long before reform offered false solutions.
The first by-election of this parliament, and it's a win for Reform, a party that barely scratched the surface in the general election in this seat, now taking the seat by a majority of 6.
Reform is predicted to win 15 to 25 seats in the next election. Enough to force a coalition government, enough to set the agenda. Across Europe, populist parties follow the same pattern. Economic anxiety plus cultural change brings political disruption. Britain's political establishment said Brexit was impossible until it wasn't. They said reform couldn't govern. They said that about Brexit too. Michael still believes his vote mattered. Danny still hopes for a future he can afford. And Sarah wants to teach in a system that works. The question isn't if reform will win. It's what happens to the Britain that made them necessary. Reform didn't create Britain's problems, but they might be the price we pay for ignoring them. Britain needs reform, but it doesn't need reform.